Hey everybody, Albie here from Spirit for Spirits, welcoming you back behind the stick. Today we're talking rye, one of my favorite categories in all of whiskey. Rye has a really cool and old history. One of the oldest ryes you'll see out there these days is stuff made by Seagrams. Back in the day, rye was the main grain being used in Canada, so almost all Canadian whiskey was sort of considered rye. Now, what is rye? For us in the States, rye refers to a whiskey that has a majority rye grain in its base. So it's at least 51% rye. So this rye, that super old one, this particular bottle is a 1956 bottle of Seagrams that I happen to keep in my bar, like some really cool old vintage stuff. The previous bottle that I had before this one was a delight. So if you find a cool old bottle of Seagrams, I do really recommend it. Non-charred filtered, really cool stuff. Basically, the thing we're looking for in rye is the spiciness of rye grain. When I think about it in terms of bread, I think about the sweetness of cornbread, sort of like the blandness of a wheat bread, or the spiciness of rye. Which route would I want to go? I really like a good spicy rye. Now, where does that really pair? I'm going to move you right over here where you see this this New York State one from Coppersea, the Excelsior New York Rye. This is from New York State. It's a distillery up in New Paltz, New York. Really cool, small distiller, and they're doing some really great stuff. Local grain, great local rye, and then going into a brand new, freshly charred white American oak cask. And what do we learn about in bourbon? If you haven't watched the bourbon episode, check it out. When we age in that bourbon barrel, when it's brand new and freshly charred, we get a lot more of those spice notes, things we've talked about along the way, the cinnamons, nutmegs, cloves, that sort of stuff. And how does that pair with the spiciness of rye? Well, I recommend you buy a bottle of rye and find out. The last really cool thing that I put in is something wildly different. So we have something new, we have something old, and then we have something crazy different. This Mad River Distillers came up with a really super fun idea. And instead of just doing a light char to the beginning of their malting process in trying to release some of the sugars from the grain itself, they actually went to a point of what they call a chocolate malt, which is almost like making stout beer to start, where you're gonna like almost burn it, bring in some of the dark notes, the things we think of in stout beer, of chocolates, of coffees, of those sorts of flavors that are much darker, a bit more bitter, a bit more charred, and then put it in a charred barrel as well in order to give it this beautiful color and some of those spice notes. So in something like this, we have some of those sweeter, darker, richer flavors melded with the spiciness of rye grain and that aging process in that barrel, making those spices come alive. We've got a really cool breadth of something old, something new, something extravagant, a really cool way to look at rye whiskey. Now, I know I talked about something old, but there's nothing older than Scotch when it comes to distilling, but that's another story. Next time, Behind the Stick.